guys, it is Jo here, and as promised I have returned with another video on how to dye fabrics. Today I've switched it up a little bit because I want to show you a different product from the RIT dye range, which is RIT Dye More. And dye more means you can dye fabrics with a synthetic content, and you will get different levels of saturation of colour depending on your fabric content. But you probably often wonder, when people are dyeing, they're always dyeing cotton or calico or a natural fabric, and what happens if you need to dye something that has a more synthetic content. My shirt that I'm wearing at the moment is a ready to wear shirt, and it was a white shirt and it just started to get that sort of chewing gum grey colour, so I dyed it with a RIT dye. And this is a perfect example to show you what happens when you have a synthetic content rather than a natural colour. So this is the shirt. The shirt is cotton, so it's taken the dyes really well. But you can see here on the button band, because the thread is a polyester also thread, then that remains white and doesn't go green like the rest of the fabric. You can combat this in a couple of ways. You can either dye with RIT More, which means that the stitching would have dyed as well, or if you're making your own garments, you can sew up your garments with a cotton thread on a cotton natural fibre, and think a little bit ahead in the future. Would I want to dye this white shirt? If I do, I'm going to sew it with cotton thread, so that when I dye it with just normal RIT dye, then all of the fabric and the thread will dye the same colour. You might see me do this a few times in some of my sew-alongs. If I do make something white, I always think, how long will it last white? I'll probably want to dye it in the future. I'm going to dye a couple of things today. I'm going to dye a piece of fabric, because you might want to create a piece of fabric before you make your garment. So today I'm using a poly cotton fabric. It's a lower end in our fabric price range because of the polyester content, but then you need to use the RIT More dye if you want to dye it a different colour. That polyester content will hold the dye back a little bit. I'm also going to dye a ready to wear garment, just so that you can see the saturation on a completely synthetic piece of fabric too. Dyeing can really get you out of a fix sometimes. If you get a little mark somewhere and you dye it a little bit darker, you can just disguise a stain on a garment, or you might want to dye something a specific colour to go with a particular outfit. This blouse here from Catherine is absolutely beautiful, a lovely peachy colour, and it was a blouse that was cream, and she dyed it with RIT More, and now it's a fabulous outfit with her floral skirt. RIT More is really great if you want to dye trims as well. So you sometimes find people who make lingerie use it, because they might use it to dye channeling or elastic or ribbons or trims to use in underwear, so they can get a really good colour match with their fabric. Quite often you find elastics just come in black or white, so you don't have that same choice to match elastics and make something really special. So the RIT dye is useful for that too. There are instructions on the back of the RIT dye. They're really small. It's definitely a time for me to wear my glasses, but hopefully I can decipher those instructions for you today, and you can see how to dye in real time so that you don't have to read those tiny instructions. You can also visit the RIT website, where you'll get lots of extra tips too. My poly cotton is blue because I want to show that you don't always have to dye a white fabric, so you could choose any colour here. You could also choose a ready printed fabric, and you will just get a different background, and it will change some of the colours in the print. So if you had a floral design and you dipped it in a blue dye, then any red flowers would go a purpley colour, etc. All the things you know about colour mixing will happen in the fabric and the colours that are on it, but you'll end up with a whole background colour that's the same, and it all becomes really harmonious. I'm folding another Tejme triangle design, so I'm layering up the fabric in an accordion shape. Because I've already got a blue colour, I'm going to use the block clamps. They will squeeze the fabric and they will hold that bluer colour in the centre. And now I can add the elastic bands. But this that's exposed will get darker blue, and this under here will remain the pale blue of the original fabric colour. If I can get a little squeeze on those layers there with a double band, and here at the back I'll get another resist line there and there. These bits will stay blue unless I do anything to them, so I'm going to add another little twist there. That should give me dark blue, light blue, dark blue, light blue. So I should get some interesting designs from this pack. That's ready for the dye. I'm going to prepare my ready to wear garments too. Next up in this batch of dye, I'm going to put this cardigan. Now, my daughter bought it from Vinted and she thought it was a pale blue, but in real light it's a real minty green and she doesn't like it. She says it looks a little bit like a hospital colour, so she doesn't want it. And we checked the label. It is 81% acrylic and 19% polyester, and I can take that to a 40-degree wash and a little bit more because she's got a little bit of room in it as well. I'm not going to make any tie-dye on here. I'm just going to do a straight dye on here so we can see the colour difference. I just need to make sure that I've got enough space in the bucket for this to swish around so that dye doesn't sit in particular areas, otherwise we'll get a mottled look. This is a ready-to-wear sweatshirt which we have dyed before, and you can see it's not a completely flat matte saturation. It's slightly mottled. It's got that sort of washed out summer look, slightly bleached look, and that's because this wasn't in a really large amount of liquid. So this was left in a bowl like this to dye for 30 minutes. So you get pooling and more concentration on where the dye is sitting on the fabric. If you want a completely flat matte colour saturation, you need to keep the fabric moving and make sure you've used the dye quantities to the full 3 gallons so that you get plenty of room to swish your fabric in. This is fine because it's a casual sweatshirt, so we can go for the sun bleach look. Just so you can get a good idea of the colour saturation if we use the quantities directly from the bottle. Also got a white top. It's gone a little bit grey. It's just a cheap vest top, and my daughter wears these a lot under shirts, so I'll take this from white to the ratio prescribed on the bottle, and you can see what colour you get with the Rit Dye More Midnight Navy. All of these pieces will need to be wet. I'm going to weigh them dry, and I think I'll probably get to a pound in fabric weight, and then I can use the quantities on the bottle. I might need to soak this one in just a bowl of water to make sure that enough water gets all the way through those layers so that the dye takes really nice and quickly and evenly. Okay, I'm all set up, and this time instead of doing a stovetop method, which I did in my first video, I'm going to do a bucket method, and I'm going to do it outside because I've got quite a lot of items that I want to slosh around in the dye. I've got my washing up liquid, some salt, the fixative for the second step, and my Rit dye. This is Rit Dye More, of course, for synthetic fabrics. Soaked my shibori pack, so that's all nice and wet now, and I've also got the jumper and the t-shirt nice and wet, so that's all the area prepared. I've got a piece of plastic sheet down so I don't get dye everywhere. The next step is to put 3 gallons of water into the bucket, and it needs to be hot water, so this takes quite a while because I'll need to boil the kettle and get hot water, and I want the water to be around 200 Fahrenheit. Okay, I've got 3 gallons or 24 pints of hot water. I'm going to add to the mix a teaspoon of washing detergent and a cup of salt. I'm going to give that a stir until it's all dissolved, and half a bottle of Rit. I'm going to put this one in first because this one can sit in the bottom. And then I'll put the ready to wear garments in so that I can keep them moving on the top. Going to stir this now for 30 minutes. If you walk away and just leave it like this, you'll get that patchy beach vibe that I showed you before in the sweatshirt. So you need to keep the dye moving around the folds of the fabric. Okay, my 30 minutes is up. So I've fished this one out of the bottom and I've put a little bit of extra dye just on those tips. And now I'm going to take out and squeeze the other garments. And you can see with different fabric compositions, I've got different colours. So this one is definitely more navy. And the wool is much lighter, but it's a really nice shade of blue. It's evening sun here, so it's got a slight sort of evening glow on it. But the next thing we're going to do is fix the colour with some fixative. When you've dyed your items, it's a good idea to use a fixative to give it more sustainability so that when you wash it, the dye and the colour saturation stays as you want it rather than fading over time. You buy the fixative separate and it works alongside the RIP dye. Okay, I've cleaned the bucket and refilled with 3 gallons of hot water again. And now I'm going to add half a bottle of fixative. You need the water to be as hot as the fabric that you're using can stand. So with a synthetic fabric, you can go pretty hot. Ideally, you want the water temperature to be 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees centigrade. Mix well and add your fabrics. When the fabric is wet, it looks darker, and when it's wrung out, it looks lighter. You need to keep the fabric in the fixative with continuous stirring for 20 minutes. Okay, my 20 minutes is up. So the fabric is all fixed. And I'm just going to be a little bit careful with the jumper so that I don't stretch it out of shape. So I want to take some of the weight out. I'm going to empty the bucket and fill it up with cold water. The final stage is to remove the elastic bands from anything that you've done a resist technique on. And we're going to rinse the fabric in the cold water until it runs clear. To do the same with the other items. And you'll need several rinses of cold water. That one's clear. I'm going to hang it on the line to dry, give it a bit more of a wring out. But you can see I've got those triangle shapes from the blocks and the elastic bands. I'll give the ready to wear items another rinse too. And these are ready to hang out. I suggest if you're doing knitwear that you don't hang it on the line or you'll stretch out your garment. You need to dry this one flat on a towel. This water is now clear. Okay, let's have a look at the results. So we've got the cardigan first, which was a minty green and is now a beautiful pale chambray blue. That's acrylic. I could have gone a little darker on that, but I did use the full 3 gallons of water, so I had quite a weak dilution. It does prescribe on the back of the bottle that if you want a darker dilution, you can put a whole bottle in the 3 gallons of water. Also, because I used the bucket method outside, I couldn't hold the temperature of the water. If I'd done the stovetop method, I could have kept the dye hotter, so I would have got a better saturation. So these are all things to consider when you're using the dye. This was the vest top, so this went from white to really the colour on the bottle, which is the navy. This has got a cotton content, so this is a 50% cotton, 45% polyester and 5% elastane. So this has taken the dye much more because it has a cotton content. And this is my poly cotton one that I did with the shibori dye technique. So you can see in the middle I didn't get any dye at all. That's where the plates were, but I got a good amount of dye on the edges. I did put a little bit of extra neat dye on the corners. Otherwise, again, a little bit like the cardigan, I would have got quite a pale colour. But I'm really happy with that. I think it looks really nice on a blue fabric, and I'll be using that fabric to make something for myself in the future. I've got a beautiful piece of fabric there, so I'm going to maybe think about making some pyjama bottoms with those, some little shorts that I can wear with a t-shirt. I think it'll make a really nice set. Thank you very much for watching. We will add some more videos on dyeing to our little mini series here, so do keep your eyes peeled. If you subscribe on our YouTube channel, you will get our videos come through to your feed. We have a daily video, so there's always lots of great sewing inspiration. If you want more sewing inspiration, then do make a free account over at Minerva. You can share your makes there. You can add a photograph, a description. It doesn't have to be products from Minerva. We just love to see what everyone has been up to. You can also join the craft club there too, where you can receive discounts and offers throughout the year, which might be a good time to sign up if you're looking to get a collection of dyes. Thank you very much for watching, and next time I will be doing some dip dyeing where you get a wave.